Hello and welcome to Rival Reds. I'm here with Mike. We're drinking a pint of Saltaire Blonde. Cheers, Mike. I'm Rick and we're at The Place in Leeds. We're here to discuss football.
Absolutely. In particular, we're here to talk about how a team very near and dear to my heart, the awful Liverpool FC, can hope to catch Manchester City last year, as we say, in the season coming up. As we say, Liverpool, along with every other team, were nowhere near City last season, despite playing some very attacking football at times and earning a lot of plaudits for the way that Klopp approached the game, and despite having one of the best seasons from any individual player in Mo Salah, Liverpool weren't able to make it a competitive title race. What has to change?
So, I think there's an argument to be made that despite finishing fourth, we were the closest team to City in terms of our performances. We beat them 3 times over the course of the season. We were probably next to them the most serious attacking force in the league. And I think the main thing with Liverpool under Klopp is I think Klopp, with a bunch of non-leaguers, could beat anyone on their day. I think he's that good. And I think the difference for Klopp is that the better his players get, the more consistent his team becomes. And I think that in replacing Chan with Naby Keita and in getting Fabinho in as support / possible replacement for Henderson, I don't know how that's going to work out yet, but we are potentially looking at strengthening the side. And as I said, the better players that he has, I think the more consistent that we'll see the team. And I think the truth of it is we have to see a drop off from City. We have to. If we don't, I don't think anyone can catch them. I
agree.
Yeah, and I think they were so good last season that we just all live in hope that they possibly won't be that good again this season. Mm-hmm. And I certainly hope that teams in the lower half of the table look at the way that we've beaten them, look at the way that Wigan beat them, look at those performances and start to think, actually it's doable. You don't have to be Liverpool to beat them. You can be Wigan and beat them. And they look at the format that they use to beat them, and they use that as a template to try to win games against them. Because I think far too often last season, teams gave up before they even
stepped on the field. I think it did happen.
I
think teams set up against them with the absolute hope to keep it respectable and to perhaps nick a point if they could. And I think I completely agree that, as we saw from Chelsea the season before, a system that looked unstoppable and uncounterable in the actual season itself can be very easily, well, maybe not very easily, but can be figured out as time goes on, and teams can have a different approach to it, and the prevailing wisdom and what other teams do will mean, I would certainly hope, that it will not be anywhere near as easy for City as next season. So getting back to Liverpool, you said that essentially you see it as the system stays the same, you just swap out a slightly inferior part for a slightly superior part, and that is a way in which you can close the gap on City.
Yeah, I actually think the first team is good enough to perform at a high level if we can keep them all fit for the full season. But short of Leicester in their title winning season, I think they had 16 injuries across the whole season, and your average number of injuries across the whole season is more akin to like 60, 70.
Yeah.
So they were like,
one-off in more ways.
So one-off. I don't think we're going to see that kind of thing again. So when we do get our injuries, we just need to see players coming in that aren't such a massive drop-off in the quality that we have. And our front three is a prime example. We have Dominic Solanke and Ings coming in for if anyone gets injured up front. And I don't think that's currently good enough to see us through to the title, yeah, we might. I can totally see us getting 80 points, possibly even like high 80s, but that's not necessarily enough to win the league title. We then have to hope that other teams take something like 15 points off City. If we get high 80s, we have to hope that the other teams around us take 15 points off City just to finish top. And then that's on top of the fact that we have to hope that Tottenham and United don't improve beyond where we've improved. So I think we have to plug certain gaps. I'm not happy with Moreno as a backup to Robertson, although I don't think that'll be changed. I'm not happy with the backups that we've got for the front three. I think it's... Don't get me wrong, I really like Solanke. I really like the likes of the young players that we have, Woodburn and Wilson. I think Sturridge is probably on his way out of the club, even though I think he's an absolutely top-notch player. I don't think that he's necessarily even going to be available because of his injury record.
He's not somebody else's.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my. Let's say we keep everyone fit with the team that we've got now. I think we could push City close if we have the kind of fitness levels that Leicester had in the season they won it. I think we could push City really close. But I don't think we can. I don't think there's any reasonable reason why we think that would happen. And so I think we need to plug some gaps with personnel.
I think that's a sensible suggestion. I think I would agree that certainly there is a complete disparity in the size and quality of the squad between you and City. One of my reservations would be, and this has been a criticism that was levelled at Liverpool a lot last year, was that your system is a one that can and frequently does lead to, I guess you could call them anomalous results against teams who you should be, who end up turning you over or you're unable to beat. Particularly in the first half of the season, some very surprising losses or draws against relegation fodder or teams in the lower half. Every team has that to some extent, but I think there was a sort of prevailing belief that maybe the system Klopp plays is, yes, very good against taking teams on at their own game, and as you say, you beat City 3 times, but could not have that consistency to beat the lower teams.
Well, we only had 2 losses up to January, I think, and they were against Burnley and United. I think United, we easily could have won that game had the ref not been in the pocket.
This was since January. Yeah. So,
and then the Burnley game, I think, it's a bit of a funny one. We were kind of just out of the game the whole time. It was like the team were had a bit of a hangover. It was odd. It wasn't a Liverpool performance as I've come to know it, or a Klopp performance. And I think part of that goes back to talking about the consistency, and the more good players you have in the side, the more consistent you can be, because you don't have to rely on the same 2 or 3 players each time. You can rely on other players stepping up and helping them to raise their game, maybe if they're having an off day.
I suppose the consistency element and the lack thereof in Klopp's system is the fact that you, by playing such an expansive style, you leave your defence quite vulnerable to making a mistake. And, Lovren, say what you want about him, but even if you assume he's a good defender who is put at more risk of making a mistake because of the system you're playing, that in and of itself leads to teams who, if you set up in the other extreme of a Mourinho style, say, would not normally score against you, having the opportunity to score against you. Do you think that those, I guess, inherent weaknesses, or one of that, just it's a risk that's always going to exist in a Klopp system? Is your answer to that, we'll just score more than them, we'll get better players in to score more than them, or is there a way to stop that from happening, to stop you dropping points where you shouldn't?
I think what's unavoidable is the fact that we had too many draws last season. And I think that was partly to conceding late goals, and Lovren was a culprit in some of those late goals for lack of concentration. And probably across our back line, we had those lapses of concentration last season that led to us conceding late goals. And if you look at it, we did concede a lot of them late on, certainly more than we have been used to in previous seasons. I think there's certainly an element of the way we play. It's unavoidable for us to come under pressure at some point in the game, and perhaps you could say that game management would help us with that. If we had more strength in midfield, which we do this season, maybe we'd be able to manage the transition between an attack for us to the opposition being on attack in a better way. Maybe the pressure wouldn't come on our defence as quickly as it does currently. And I don't know if I've certainly said in the past that our defenders are better than they appear. Mm-hmm. We have Lovren, when he was at Southampton, was an absolutely fantastic player, probably the best in the league at centre back, and that's why we bought him for so much money at the time. And came to us and just didn't seem to be capable of performing at that level.
Yeah, he looked like a different player.
But Van Dijk has come in, and all of a sudden, he looks like the player he was that we bought from Southampton. He looks like an absolutely fantastic player. And I don't know how much you've watched him in the second half of the season, but he looks really, really, really strong. And then, beside him, we've got Robertson, who's a lot more reliable than Moreno, and then take your pick from our right back options. I think we will look a lot more defensively solid. So that's not really been a worry for me this summer. I've not certainly not like it was last season. Like I was crying that we wasn't getting a top class left back, and that we hadn't managed to secure the services of Van Dijk.
Yeah,
I was just thinking, this is disarray. We might as well write off the season already. We're only going to finish fourth.
Thank God you're wrong.
And luckily throughout the season we managed to secure Van Dijk, and Robertson came. I can't believe how well that panned out. I can't believe. And we were really lucky that the injury to Klein actually brought through Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I think has been an absolute brilliant asset for us. And Gomez has proven his defensive qualities before his injury as well. And hopefully he'll be able to move to centre-back as a backup to the first choice too. I think we're in a good position defensively for next season. I'm not overly concerned with the way that we play and what effect that has on our personnel. I think we now have the personnel to look after our defensive situation, no matter what we're doing offensively.
That's interesting, yeah. And I think that to some extent, just Klopp being there for another year will also have that effect of it's more understandable what the weaknesses and what's required of us players and what is left, what's outstanding and what the weaknesses of playing that system for an extra year are, because there's more information available. Moving on to another of the, I don't want to call them supposed weaknesses, but one of the weaknesses that's clearly brought up when discussing Klopp is that, let's assume, for argument's sake, that you are not strong enough to win the league next season, but that you have to rely on, similarly to this season, a couple of good cup runs. Klopp's record in finals is well known. The fact that you were beaten by Real Madrid this season is not in and of itself surprising. They are a superior side, I think, in most ways to Liverpool, as were most of the opponents of Klopp during that spell. Do you have any reservations about the fact that Klopp has, despite having an expansive and laudable style of football, has not been able to take any silverware to date. Do you think that will, the longer that goes on, the more of an effect that will have?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a niggling doubt at the back of your mind that maybe he's just...
And the back of his mind as well, presumably. Yeah.
No, he's got a steel-like resolve. It's admirable to see, really. I think he's absolutely... I can't speak highly enough about his mindset. I think he's just an absolutely wonderful, wonderful guy. I wish I could have the kind of mindset that he does. But as a supporter looking on, you have to wonder if he's not necessarily if he's a loser, but if that for all his positives, that he might not just be able to overcome that final hurdle. Yeah, as you mentioned, Madrid have got a superior side to us for all intents and purposes for the personnel that are there. But he's able to overcome that in most games that we play. If we win 60% of our games, that's a large number for a side that's considered inferior to the...
Particularly against the rest of the best teams as well. I think that's a crucial part, the fact that, yes, Klopp's other final opponents may have been the bookies' favourites, but so are most of his clashes against the big sides in the league, and they're traditionally the sides that Liverpool have done very, very well in. Why is he not able to get that over to a final?
In Europe, against sides that we come up against over 2 games, we've scored 5 goals or more against our last 7 opponents.
Wow, yeah, that's a hell of a record.
It's not like we're not doing well. Yeah, we've come up against all sorts in that run. We've done amazingly well. The way he has us playing is electric. But in that one game format, we just seem to struggle that little bit more, and that's been proven in the FA Cup. We seem to struggle that little bit more over the one game format, and I don't know why that is. And there's extenuating circumstances for the Champions League final, with Mo Salah's injury and with Karius's purported concussion.
Yeah.
But those aside, you would have hoped for a better performance from us, and I think our defence as a whole performed amazingly well in the final, and I think Mane performed amazingly well in the final, but Firmino was very quiet. Lallana wasn't his usual self because he wasn't playing in his normal number 10 role. I think we had a bit of an off day, and the worst thing is it's happened in the final, so
and
we don't really get a second chance. We could have had if it was over 2 legs, I think we probably could have turned them over.
Yeah, I do take that point. I think that with more times where you will have that period of blitzkrieg or whatever you want to call it, where you will be on the front foot and will be able to put a team to the sword, you will be more confident. Is perhaps the fact that he sort of rigidly sticks to his style and doesn't really, regardless of who he plays, it is a bit of a factor when you come into these finals? Is that what you put it down to? Essentially, is the reason why he is losing this final a concern to you going forward? If you were to play a final this season,
no, not really, because the finals that we've lost, I don't think we've been ourselves. So I think it's more a translation of when Mo Salah went off, we were on top of that game and looking like Real Madrid were just going to be cast aside like a set of nobodies.
Yeah, it was a strong start. Yeah,
we were just all over the final, and it looked like it was going to be no problem. It looked like it was just a matter of time before we scored. And even after they scored, we responded immediately. We scored, and then I think after they scored their second, Mane hit the post, and it could have been a very, very different final. Even though I feel a little bit like we weren't at our best, I still feel like we were in it for long parts of the game, and ultimately they've won because of 2 mistakes that Karius made.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel like we were that far away. And moreover, I've not enjoyed watching Liverpool this much since the 90s.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Every single time we turn up to play, I'm not expecting us to knock in 4 or 5, but I know it's a possibility.
Yeah.
And that in itself is really, really exciting. Even if it gets to the 80th minute, I'm sort of half expecting it still to finish 4 or 5-0. Like, it's just going to, because we're so capable of just knocking in a bunch of goals in a really short space of time. It's just so much fun to watch as a supporter. I think I've said to you in the past that I think I'd happily go 5 or 6 years without any trophies, because it's so much enjoyment that I'm getting from each individual game.
Yeah, and I can see the. It depends what your priorities are, whether winning silverware.
Obviously, we want to win silverware. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is ultimately when you're a supporter of a successful club. That's ultimately what you're wanting. I feel like is the way we play under Klopp is deserving of trophies. And I think they will. I think if we continue to play the way we do, and I think if we can keep together the core of the squad, then I think it's only a matter of time before trophies come.
Let's fast forward for a year. Let's assume that Liverpool have done basically what they did this season, have basically been the same position as they were the season before.
Fourth,
very little change in that.
Champions League final.
Yeah, let's assume 4th and a cup final, say. If it's Champions League or FA Cup, but haven't quite got over the line, is that a success? Or at that point, is there calls on Klopp to win something even greater? How long can you keep up with this?
Maybe it depends on whether the deficiencies have been met. Let's say we sign Nabil Fekir. Let's say we sign Shaqiri. Let's say we sign a forward as backup for Firmino. If that has all been done, and that happens, then I don't think you can place any blame on Klopp, because he's done absolutely everything within his power to sign contingencies. But if we get to those finals, if we finish 4th and we've fallen away in those competitions because somebody gets injured in a final like Salah, who's so key to us, and we don't have a decent player to come in and support, then I think you've got to ask questions about why we haven't signed a player. Given that was so key in the final, him going off, you've got to say, why didn't we have somebody of the standard? Well, they don't have to be Mo Salah. Nobody's going to be as good as he was last season. But for there to be, Lallana's not a wide player. He's the number 10 all day of the week. So he should never have been playing out there. But we didn't have anybody else to play out there.
Yeah, that spoke at volumes in the final when Real Madrid brought on Gareth Bale. Yeah. And you brought on Adam Lallana, who hadn't played a full game since God knows when.
Don't get me wrong, Adam Lallana's amazing.
Yeah.
But he's amazing to replace somebody in the number 10 role.
Yeah,
he's not.
You change your strategies in the match.
Yeah, he can't play those wide forward roles. He's not good. When he played those roles we saw it with England 2 years ago, when he was playing in that number 10 role, he was the man of the match every single game. When he was playing out wide, it was anonymous. And it's just players being misused is my biggest bugbear. And
I think that's an important point.
But we didn't have an option in the final. It's not like Klopp could have said, all right, well, you take a run out there. We just didn't have the personnel to do it.
Yeah, and if that happens once, fine. If that happens twice, then it's a failure to address the things that you know are an issue.
And I think we need somebody in that can play in those roles. If we get Shaqiri and Fekir in, or not necessarily Fekir, because it looks like that's not going to happen because of potential injuries. But if we get Shaqiri and another as a backup, then great. If we do the same thing that we did this year, then we've done everything we can, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think that comes to a sort of a key difference in outlooks or or in priorities of the two teams, and it's reflected in the optimism of the fans. In that Liverpool for the last 2 years haven't been as successful as United, haven't won any trophies. Yet there is far more optimism about Liverpool because of the way that you play and because of what you can see the future to be.
It's a defined way. You know going into a game how you're going to play, and you know that is difficult to live with. Whereas United, you almost don't know how they're going to play. You almost, and if it's against a big team, you're even more in the dark. You're thinking, are we going to park the bus? Or we're going to give it, the first half against Liverpool, you actually gave it a go and looked like a decent team, and then the second half, it tore you apart. You're very lucky to get some referee decisions go your way.
Well, I think we'll park that discussion of that individual game. Suffice it to say that that was an example of approaching a one-off game and probably getting the edge over a system that Mourinho maybe has the edge over Klopp at. If you were in a final tomorrow, you would probably want to be managed by Jose Mourinho than Klopp.
He's a single game specialist.
Yeah, he can set his team up to neutralise whatever other teams.
Absolutely fantastic. And I don't think that can be arguable. What happened in the last final that you guys played? Just remind me.
That's a good point, and that can occasionally happen. That is the anomaly, the exception that proves the rule, I believe they call it.
So what happened?
And and we lost to Chelsea, and that made the season
I remember.
even more of a damp squib of a finish. But the fact that even if we'd won that, it would have been absolutely cut and dry. You can look back at the 2 seasons of each manager and say Mourinho, regardless of what he's played, has won 4 trophies.
He does have a great record over a single game.
Yeah.
Maybe that is testament to his ability to get players keyed up for individual matches, and I think for those individual matches, players can put aside their distaste for the manager, and he can say, look, if you might hate me, but at the end of this game, we're coming out of it with a trophy. It's a trophy in your cabinet. It's a medal on your shelf that nobody can take away from you.
Yeah, agreed.
And no matter how much of a dick you think I am, do this today and you'll remember it forever.
Exactly.
And then they can put aside all their differences and just get on with it. And I think that's what I actually think from now on he's going to struggle with in the Premier League. I don't think he's going to be able to do that over the course of a season.
Over 38 games. Yeah. It's harder to motivate them over that period, and
particularly when he's taking chunks out of his players like Luke Shaw. I really don't see what that poor guy is that he's done much wrong.
No, I would agree with that. And the Luke Shaw point, he's kept there as an example to his other players, more so than a redemption story himself. He's kept there as the person to say, don't want to bully. Yeah, you don't want to end up like that guy.
Don't be Luke Shaw.
Yeah, he's the spiked head outside the kingdom walls, as if to say, look at that person. You don't want to be. You don't want to end up like that.
Mata was at for a period at Chelsea.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's ended up at United in a weird kind of quasi. I like you now.
That's it.
You've redeemed yourself kind of way.
There's complicated relationships that he develops, and Klopp is definitely a more outwardly a person who's easier to like and easier to engender that sort of loyalty with his players. I think for Klopp, there is still a couple of issues that remain from pretty much his first season at Liverpool, where his final record is poor, and his record in just being always one game away from disaster is pretty close.
One thing I haven't really addressed that is probably on the mind of anyone thinking what Liverpool need to do to win the league title is the goalkeeper.
Yes, so this brings us on to this point, and this is, I think, a more being concise. What are the 3 biggest things that Liverpool needs to overcome City?
Okay, so in my heart of hearts, I know that we need a better keeper. If we had somebody of the standard of De Gea, then I think we'd have a lot less to worry about. But I don't want us to just go out and buy another good keeper. I don't think we need to buy, say, Nick Pope or Jack Butland to be another squad member, because I don't think they're necessarily streets above where Karius is.
Agreed.
I think he showed in the second half of last season that he can be a fantastic keeper, and his distribution is brilliant. But he's not Jan Oblak. He's not David De Gea.
He's not one of the best keepers in the world.
And unless we're going to go out and spend 70 or 80 million, which is what seems to be the asking price for that standard of keeper, I don't think we're going to get an improvement in that position. And the thing is, as much as I think Klopp is the most wonderful coach I've ever seen in my life, I don't think you can necessarily coach a keeper to the level of improvement that we need to see to get them up to that standard. I don't think Karius is ever going to meet that standard. I think as a keeper, you're kind of out on your own. It's a bit of a different fish to the rest of the team.
Yeah, definitely.
So for me,
position.
Keeper number one.
Yeah.
Number two, back up to the front three.
Yeah.
Whatever form that comes in, we need better backup to the front three. I really like Solanke, but he's probably more like a youth backup. I'd want if Firmino got injured, I want somebody to back him up, maybe like a Sturridge, but somebody who wasn't injury prone.
Yeah.
And then behind him, like a young person like Solanke. And then similarly for the wide players, maybe you could have one person to cover both, because Mane can switch wings, and then maybe you just slot the other person in whichever side you need, as long as they're versatile. And then I think the third thing, probably a backup to Robertson. Because if Robertson gets injured, I have no confidence whatsoever that Moreno would be able to do a job over a sustained period for
True, yeah.
I think he's such a liability that I think that is a major worry for the team. If Robertson gets injured, I just don't know how. He can be fantastic. He can be a match winner on his day, but at the same time, he's more likely to lose the match than he is to win a match.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my third concern, would be what would happen if Robertson got injured.
Interesting points. And fundamentally, that would mean that you would be happy with Liverpool going into the new season with more or less the same first 11 as this season, minus a new keeper.
Do you know what? I think we had a fantastic first 11, and I think, as we proved on 3 occasions last season, we're more than capable of beating anyone, particularly City. And I think then it's more about consistency and actually having other teams beat City to help bring them back to where we need to be. I don't think we're going to catch up. I don't think we're going to have a 100-point season. I don't think anyone in the league is capable of that other than City. So I think other teams need to help us to bring them back to a more realistic points total of maybe high 80s.
And that's something that Liverpool can potentially equal or out to as well.
I think we'll probably see that this season. I think we'll probably finish on a high 80s total this season. I think that's, even with the current squad, I think that's probably where we'll finish. Injuries aside, I think we'll probably finish on a high 80s. If we get an injury to one of the front three, that'll be affected if we don't get back up into them. But as the squad stands, I think we're capable of finishing on high 80s, and then it's just a case of where the other teams, what points totals the other teams finish on.
And asking you to predict that, let's say this time next year, this season Liverpool finished on, am I correct in assuming that they finished in pretty much the same points total as the year before as well?
Yeah, 70, not quite. I think we had 75.
I suppose it was at 1 or 2 points out.
76.
Okay, that's right. So virtually the same points total. Let's say it's this time next year, and again the same position fourth. What's that to look like in terms of the league finish?
Okay, so if we're like high 80s, then I'd expect us to be second, because I think City are probably going to finish in the 90s, unfortunately.
To believe that. Cup runs, obviously it's looking beyond that into the future, but would you be happy with a second place finish and a half decent performance in the FA Cup?
Yeah, I think every Liverpool fan out there will tell you that a good league run and winning the cup is probably fair standard for what we've been after for the last 10 years, although for the large part it's not happened. So yeah, that'll be, we just want to keep winning trophies. Keep winning. We want to win trophies.
Well, this is what I'm sort of getting at is, let's say in hypothetical worlds you have the choice of either finishing second, so bettering your league position by 2, maybe being in a title race with City or whoever, but performing very poorly in the FA Cup and the rest of the cups, and not winning anything. And on the other hand, finishing slightly worse than you did last season, 5th, or at a push 4th, so Champions League, but far away from the league, but winning some silverware. What would you pick?
I think Champions League is key. So if it was 2nd and no silverware, or 5th and some silverware, man, I think I'd have to go for 2nd, and not because that's 2nd, but because that means Champions League football, and because it means we're probably going to retain the players that we need to have a run at the title the following season. So not about this season, more about looking forward. And if it was a case of 2nd and no cup, or 4th and a cup, obviously I'd choose 4th and a cup, because it is literally no difference these days to finishing 2nd or 4th.
I will have to check with Arsenal fans, but don't get a trophy for finishing the Champions League places. I think my concern would be that every year that goes by without Liverpool winning a trophy, but then put on top of that the league trophy, it's like a spinster. It's like a 35-year-old woman approaching the end.
We've won 1 in 10 years, though. I don't think at this stage. We are really thinking. I think we've had so long out in the wilderness, and we've been back in the Champions League for 2 years now. I think we've had so long out in the wilderness that it's really important. Yeah, and there were so many players that we missed out on in that season that we had no European football, that didn't want to, as Klopp would call it, push the train forward. And I really think we just need to remove that as an excuse for players to not come to us. And I think we need to kind of inspire players by the way that we're playing, and then not give them any reason to turn us down. So if we were interested in a player, we really need to get back to the position where they have no excuse to turn us down whatsoever. And I think being in the Champions League is the only way to do that.
Yeah, and that's so you can attract the best players in the world.
And so that the players that we have stay with us.
Yeah, true. I think that's the key issue.
For me, it's more important to challenge for the Champions League title, so that players know that you are one of the best teams.
I would agree with that.
So they've got no reason to go anywhere else.
More players will have seen Liverpool's Champions League run and the final against Real Madrid than they would have Manchester United finishing second, or any other team finishing second in the domestic league. Couldn't really tell you, barring the Spanish league, who finished second in.
I think even City finishing top.
Even
City finishing top. I think players right now are thinking Liverpool are more likely to have maybe they're not, but I think there's an element of players that will be thinking, I prefer to be at Liverpool than City.
I don't know if I would go with that at all. I think that particularly given the money that's involved, presumably in both. I think a lot of people would, even if they weren't in the Champions League final, they took themselves in.
I would say there is an element of players, because there's those players that are genuinely interested in history and interested in...
Oh, definitely. Liverpool still has that appeal to those sort of players who
certainly over City. It would be a different matter if United have just won the league, but it's not. It's City. City won the league for what, 5th time? And I think that's significant in terms of what players are looking for. When we were chatting to Nabil Fekir, his only club that he wanted to move to was Liverpool. It's the only club that he was interested in, because it had been a childhood dream for him to join Liverpool.
Yeah,
I think that's perpetuated throughout football. I think there'll be the same players that only want to play for United. There'll be the same players that only want to play for Madrid or Barcelona. Coutinho only wanted to play for Barcelona.
Yeah, historic clubs can attract that, and that is an extra element. Whether it's as much as the money now is I think a foregone conclusion, and also every year that goes by, that kid is more likely to dream about playing for City or whoever it is.
Club.
It's got a finite lifespan on it. That
luckily we don't have any 5-year-olds that Liverpool are over after City.
Exactly.
So it should be fine.
And then the final point, and this is, allow me to naysay, Liverpool finished 4th on pretty much the same points total as last year, with, as I said at the start of the programme, the best individual season of a player since Ronaldo won the Champions League and the league, and would have won a treble if it wasn't for a terrible referee against Portsmouth. Of course, I mean Salah. Salah had a season that you couldn't have predicted, Klopp couldn't have predicted, Salah couldn't have predicted, and that will probably, you would imagine, never happen again in his career, and you can't rely on another player to have a season like that. Why did Liverpool, when that happened, finish without any silverware and 4th? How do they improve that situation without that happening next year?
Because I don't necessarily think it's about the individual player. So Salah's had an absolutely fantastic season. So we're next season probably expecting to see a lot of coverage on Salah to stop him having the same kind of game that he's had experienced over the last year. But what that does is free up other players to have the kind of game that he's had over the last year.
Okay, so
I think the goals will be more
system rather than
and I think the goals are going to be shared out because people will be applying over coverage to Salah and not paying enough attention to the key pivotal point last season, which was Firmino.
True. Yeah, I think Firmino is definitely a player where a lot of fans and presumably managers as well have really underestimated his importance on that Liverpool team, at least until the last 2 or 3 months of the season, when his statistics started backing up how important and crucial he was. I would expect him to have a bit closer attention as well.
The thing is, I think the way we play is not as simple as Mark Salah.
Yeah, agree.
You'll be alright, Liverpool will do nothing.
Yeah.
I think it's a case of try to mark Salah. And if he doesn't get in behind us and score 2 or 3, we've done well.
Yeah, and on the break, when you've got your left back's just gone a bit too far forward, then that's when Salah will pop out. It doesn't matter whether he's been man-marked or anything. So I don't think he'll have the season that he had last year, but yeah, it may not be. It'll be up to Liverpool to find a way to compensate for those goals, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think the players that we have are more than capable of doing that. Firmino has improved every season. Mane is a phenomenon. Yeah, I don't think I can speak highly enough of Mane. And then we've also had Naby Keita come in, who I watched in the first pre-season game for Liverpool on the weekend, and it was absolutely fantastic against Chester. He just, every single touch, he looked like a world-class player. and I think he's just going to have a huge impact on the way we play, particularly while Oxlade-Chamberlain is out, who was incredible in the last third of the season before he got injured.
Yes.
In his driving runs, the way that he played, he changed our midfield massively. I think our midfield is going to be totally different. I think it's almost going to be difficult to fathom how different our midfield will perform this season to last. And I think it's going to totally change the way we play.
Yeah, I can see that. There's definitely some exciting signs, and Keita in particular. There's a lot of eyes to see if he can put in the sort of performances that, with the level of expectation that's on him, I think. It's at the end of the day, you would predict a finish of.
I'm thinking second.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see. Last season, I didn't see the United or Tottenham really were better teams than us, and I think with the addition of the players that we have, we'll probably see a more consistent Liverpool to finish above them.
Okay, interesting. I think that will be a sign of progress for Klopp as well. 2 positions higher, and will be a decent season. Until he wins that silverware, I think there's always going to be that monkey hanging over his back. But yeah, that would definitely be progress. And would you be happy with that?
Yeah, we could do with winning the League Cup to get that out of the way as soon as possible.
Yeah, any silverware I think at this point we probably do.
Yeah,
just to win a final. Yeah. Right. Well, that pretty much draws that segment to a close. We've been here drinking some of Saltaire Brewery's finest.
Saltaire's finest.
Saltaire Blonde. How have you found it?
Lovely, mate. Went down nice and easy.
Yes, exactly.
Good session pale.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. Pleasure as always, Matt.